Section 2, Subsection 1, Unit 1. Preparatory work, homeworks to do before starting a project. By the end of this unit, you will be able to understand the background setup needed to have a successful project conceptualization and design. Identify the initial steps within the project development cycle. Be able to identify at least 3 initiatives that local governments must do to facilitate the development of climate projects. And justify the importance of having a climate action plan. Accessing finance requires solid project concepts, thus the preparatory work before starting a project plays a key role. The project development cycle can be divided into 5 stages: early stage, mid-stage, late stage, implementation, and post-implementation. This unit covers the earliest steps of project development, starting with the key elements of an enabling environment and climate action planning. The other stages and related activities will be covered in the next unit. Let's start with the basics. What is an enabling environment for project development? An enabling environment refers to the conditions in which risks are minimized and well managed. It also means that the rights, roles, and assets of all stakeholders involved are well established. Creating an enabling environment requires different forms of municipal financing, whether in the form of own resources, government transfers, benefits, or public-private partnerships. This table shows the steps that need to be followed to create an enabling environment, as well as the role played by the local and regional government. We begin by designing the enabling legislation and regulatory approaches. This requires subnational governments to assess and define the legal framework that contributes to the implementation of climate actions, as well as those current rules that may hinder a net zero emission and climate resilient development. Next, we need to create mechanisms that facilitate vertical coordination among all levels of government. This can be done by mainstreaming subnational climate actions into key processes in budget planning allocation. Examples are national policy reforms that require local governments to secure part of their budget for climate investments, or systems to provide national public financing to local climate actions. By pursuing this type of vertical coordination, local priorities are more likely to align to those of the national level, potentially becoming part of national climate investment plans. For example, vertical integration is often in place to support the nationally determined contributions targets, which subnational governments contribute shaping. Depending on the context, setting up or reforming institutional structures may be necessary. The goal here is to ensure stable and strong institutions that can sustain economic growth and attract investors. Finally, an enabling environment requires the consensus and capacity of institutional stakeholders, as well as their leadership. This is particularly true for key actors like politicians and technocrats. All stakeholders involved must have clear roles and responsibilities, codified into a steady governance structure. Before moving on, don't forget to assess the capacity and skills of subnational government staff. A project is much more likely to be successfully implemented if the institutions supporting it have well-trained staff. Since that may require hiring external experts or training internal staff, collaboration with international organizations or initiatives such as Urban Shift can be of great help. In other words, all this arrangement will ultimately form the basis for a project's institutional support and a stable governance. We now move to the second key step of early project development, creating a climate action plan. Urban planning helps cities to identify needs, as well as set and prioritize targets. Based on this, they can define their financial demands and allocate the budget, depending on their revenue sources and abilities. A climate action plan starts with a clear vision and goals by the local government. Then comes the identification and commitment of the relevant stakeholders. While these stakeholders may include a wide range of different entities, not all of them will have the same engagement. Therefore, it is necessary to customize the type or approach needed to secure each actor's engagement, as well as a proper communication plan. Political support is also critical to guarantee the successful planning and implementation of climate projects. Here, a climate action plan is generally approved by an authority from the local or regional government. In some cases, such approval results in multiple financial institutions getting involved. In the previous units, we mentioned that political stability is key to access finance. A step in this direction is to align and connect local policies and projects to national and global agreements. For example, a climate action plan is often closely linked to the fulfillment of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 13, Climate Action, and Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. In turn, this stability and coherence among different levels of government increases the likelihood of attracting investors. Another pillar that should never be forgotten is that data speaks louder than words. Research and evaluation will establish the current conditions based on the data collected, helping to set goals and targets, as well as evaluating the results obtained. In this step, authorities not only collect data, they also detect data gaps and generate strategies and studies to acquire new data. For instance, a greenhouse gas inventory estimates the fixed, mobile, and natural emissions within the jurisdiction of a city. From these estimates, the local government can identify the largest emission sources and prioritize strategies to address them. The inventory also serves to evaluate the achievements and impacts of a climate action plan's implementation. Planning tools are needed to determine long-term goals, rules, and strategies. Capital investment plans will determine the investment required to fulfill those targets. Before moving to the next slide, let's summarize what we have seen in this one. You can see how climate action planning is an enabling element for accessing climate finance. It is based on climate data and serves as a roadmap to identify strategies for cost-effective emissions reductions. In order to aid local governments, some tools exist to guide and help them in climate action planning. Let's explore 4 of them. First, the ICLE Green Climate Cities program guides local and regional governments to analyze, act, and accelerate climate action. It aims to integrate low-emission and climate-resilient development into urban development policies, plans, and processes. For example, the program offers tools for inclusive stakeholders' engagement and empowerment, and develops institutional capacity for low-emission development. Second, the Green City Action Plan developed by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. The plan presents a methodology to assess and prioritize environmental challenges. It also aids the development of a climate action plan through policy intervention and sustainable infrastructure investments. Next, the Sustainable Energy Access and Climate Action Plan serves local authorities in sub-Saharan Africa. It promotes a series of guidelines co-developed and backed by the German Agency for International Cooperation and ICLE Africa. Last, an urban master planning is an instrument that will ensure the coherence of a project over time. It specifies the proposed layout of an area and links the intended interventions in buildings and spaces into a concrete implementation strategy. To learn more about each tool, we invite you to consult the links that will be on the downloadable slide deck. Let's now review what we have discussed in this unit. We have learned the importance of having an enabling environment before even conceptualizing a climate project. In particular, we have mentioned the significance of institutional capacities and political buy-in. Following, subnational governments should be able to respond to questions like, what are the ways to mainstream subnational climate action? What is the existing legal framework and how can it be reformed or set up? How other levels of government could support and be involved? How is the current institutional capacity? Who are the stakeholders to be involved and what are their responsibilities and roles in conducting climate actions? In addition to an enabling environment, urban planning will determine needs, priorities, and potential funding. For example, a climate action plan can help identify the most cost-effective emissions reduction measures, which in turn form the foundation for climate project proposals.